The trucking industry is by far the most pollutive mode of transportation globally, accounting for almost 25% of all transport carbon emissions in the US. To put that into perspective, aircraft only account for around 10% of this massive greenhouse pie, which itself accounts for almost 30% of all emissions. And since the trucking industry is a vital backbone of highly productive economies, there's an urgent need to decarbonize these all-important vehicles sustainably and effectively. And right now, the three primary stocks involved in this space are Nikola Motors, Hyzon, and Hyliion Holdings. So in this video, I'll be doing a highly requested comparison between the electric trucks that each one of these companies are developing, discuss the pros and cons of their individual business models, and at the end, I'll analyze the valuation and growth opportunity for each stock. But before we get into it, guys, make sure to drop me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. As you guys are well aware, on my channel, I primarily talk about Nikola Motors as this is my main stock holding for the EV trucking industry right now, primarily because of the fact that these guys are selling both battery electric and fuel cell electric trucks and are planning to invest in back-end fueling infrastructure simultaneously. But as we all know, Nikola is not the only company that is developing electric trucks, and one of the major players that also went public through a SPAC last year is a company called Hyzon. And similar to Nikola, Hyzon was founded roughly 4 to 5 years ago after it spun out of the company called Horizon Fuel Cell Technologies, which is a very big player in the fuel cell stack and module space and has developed many fuel cell products for a lot of different electric powertrain solutions and also for various industrial applications. And so although on the surface it may seem like that Nikola and Hyzon are selling pretty much similar trucks to similar markets, there are some stark differences that I think investors definitely need to keep in mind before considering investing in either one of these companies. For example, Hyzon only sells its fuel cell trucks right now in Europe, and like I said before, Hyzon does not develop battery-only trucks. And although they have created a facility in the United States, right now they're only doing prototype testing and are not actually selling any vehicles to any customers and haven't signed any LOIs or MOUs with companies in the US. But what does set Hyzon apart from a company like Nikola or even Hyliion is the fact that Hyzon develops its fuel cells completely in-house because obviously they have the backing from Horizon Fuel Cell Technologies, which has been in the fuel cell manufacturing and deployment business for over 20 years. And as you guys can see, in 2020, these guys apparently got the highest power density for their fuel cell stack that runs with liquid cooling, which is definitely very impressive and should allow these guys to get better margins as they scale going into the next few years. And from what I've been able to tell, Hyzon's leadership team definitely has more experience working in the fuel cell industry than say Hyliion or even Nikola, given the fact that they were working for Horizon Fuel Cell Technologies in the past. But as usual with every investment, there are pros and cons, and the main thing that has kept me personally away from investing in Hyzon so far is the fact that this company is only selling fuel cell trucks right now and doesn't really have a solution for short and medium hauling trucks. And the reason why that market is important is because in a shorter haul scenario, fuel cells might become a little bit too expensive, and since the infrastructure right now is just not there, the total cost of ownership for fleets will go up unnecessarily if you're selling a fuel cell only solution to some of the more smaller companies. And although unlike Nikola and Hyliion, Hyzon has already been selling trucks to customers in Europe, right now they're only targeting the European market and don't have any sales or networks in the United States, which as we all know is the largest long-haul trucking market in the entire world. And since fuel cells make sense only for long-haul trucking so far, the slightly narrow market for Hyzon might edge them out over the next few years if competition continues to increase in the EV trucking space. But don't get me wrong, if you're looking for some quick exposure to the European market over the next couple of quarters, Hyzon is potentially a great option, especially since its valuation, which I'll get later into this video, is definitely a little bit attractive. If we now move on over to Hyliion, which is yet another very talked about electric vehicle trucking play, this company essentially develops a natural gas based hybrid powertrain solution that retrofits onto pre-existing chassis. Hyliion has two main product offerings, and just like Nikola is in a very early stage of its development, which means that both companies right now are pre-revenue. The hybrid on the right is essentially what it sounds like, which is essentially a diesel or compressed natural gas engine truck that's mounted on with batteries and an electric motor, whereas on the left we have the actual longer term solution that Hyliion plans to produce over the next couple of years, which is essentially a natural gas truck with a 75-mile range battery paired with a very low carbon emission natural gas generator. From what I've been able to read, the goal of the Hypertruck ERX is to essentially make sure that fleets can integrate EV solutions into their entire business operations without having to worry about the back-end infrastructure problems for batteries and hydrogen. But the key thing to keep in mind is that Hyliion is not selling a fuel cell only or a battery only truck. They're selling a truck that runs on natural gas that can power a battery over the longer term. And the idea is that that's going to reduce range anxiety, and that's going to make it easier for trucking operators to fuel their trucks. And so on the surface, this solution is definitely very much market ready, and if it can get out to the roads right now, there is definitely going to be a very quick market adoption from fleets and businesses across the US, because obviously we have over 800 natural gas fueling stations across the entire country. And another advantage I'm seeing is that these guys are building on pre-existing OEM chassis, which means that drivers are not going to have to adapt all that much to some of the features and logistics of operating their trucks. But on the flip side, you could make the argument that a company that's selling products that only retrofit onto pre-existing chassis and a company that's not selling a fully optimized truck from the get-go might struggle longer term to keep up with its margins and keep a competitive advantage. Now sure, in the short term, for fleets to reduce their carbon emissions immediately, this is a very good solution, but Hyliion so far has not realized any material revenue from any one of these products. And although Hyliion is marketing the Hypertruck ERX as a net carbon negative emission solution, it's only going to do that if it's powered using renewable natural gas. And unfortunately, the US only has a capacity to produce around 1.5% of all its natural gas consumption through renewable resources like waste and biomass. And so what that means is that still most of the natural gas that's going to be powering the Hypertruck ERX is going to be dug out of the ground through fossil fuels, and it's going to have a carbon footprint. And although I'm not sure of the exact specifications of the natural gas generator that Hyliion is using in their Hypertruck ERX, natural gas generators are still known to have carbon emissions like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and mercury. And although these emissions are significantly lower than diesel or gasoline, they are still emissions, and 5 to 10 years down the road, as companies and countries get more stringent about emissions regulations, this could phase out Hyliion's appeal to the market. And since the employee headcount at Hyliion is roughly 25% of Nikola's, which is at around 900 employees so far, Hyliion will definitely need to invest much more in its capital to make sure that they're able to produce these trucks effectively down the road, which is something they expect to start at the end of next year. And although they have an office space and a work facility in Cedar Park, Texas, as far as I know, they don't have a fully functioning factory built out yet, which is again something they will need if they want to ramp up production cost effectively and be competitive with the battery and fuel cell trucks. And we still have yet to see how efficient it is to operate a business model where you're retrofitting existing parts onto existing fleet's trucks, which is obviously the polar opposite of a company like Nikola or even Hyzon, which is developing the trucks from ground up, even though they borrow the chassis from other OEMs. If we now move on over to analyzing some of the valuation metrics and some of the revenue numbers that these companies have projected for the next couple of years, as you guys can see for Nikola, they've estimated that they're going to be delivering around 300 to 500 battery electric trucks to customers in 2022, which is going to result in around $90 to $150 million in revenue for this year. Whereas Hyzon is expected to get in around $190 million in 2022, which paired with the fact that the stock is trading at roughly a $1.5 billion market cap makes Hyzon the best valuation deal out of all three stocks in this video. But as you can see, most of these orders are in Europe and in Asia, which means that Hyzon is going to be faced with a little bit more competition than say a company like Nikola in the United States, where we basically have no fuel cell trucks out on the road in volume production. Whereas for Hyliion, they expect to do roughly $2 to $3 million of revenue in 2022, which obviously means they're not fully mass producing their trucks and selling them to fleets this year. But that definitely does not make Hyliion a bad investment by any means, because every company is in its own stage of development. And as you guys can see, Hyliion is definitely a little behind of Hyzon and Nikola when it comes to their product development roadmap. Although they've shown their Hypertruck ERX very nicely over the past couple of months, they need to go through verification, validation, and obviously certification and the SOP in the second half of 2023. And that right there, I think, is the main pressure that Hyliion is facing right now, which is the fact that by the time they're going to have this market-ready product already out on the road with volume production, companies like Nikola and Hyzon are already going to have battery electric and fuel cell electric trucks in customers' hands. Now, obviously, both of those companies' execution is not guaranteed, but at least on paper right now, that's just the reality. And so longer term for me, even though Hyzon is trading at a better price to sales valuation right now, I'm personally putting my money on Nikola, even though I really appreciate the hard work that Hyliion and Hyzon are doing to get rid of carbon emissions from such a pollutive industry. And that's because Nikola has potentially a better chance at executing on its business model, not only because of their higher employee headcount, but also because of the capital and resources they have available right now in their factory and their joint ventures and partnerships with companies like Iveco and Bosch. And obviously they also have massive sales and dealer networks in the United States already established, which means that fleets and businesses already have a line of contact in case they want to get these trucks out on the roads. And since obviously Nikola is offering both a short-haul battery and a long-haul fuel cell version, and the back-end infrastructure to support some of these trucks through their mobile charging trailer and some of their hydrogen dispensing and generation plans throughout 2023, there's potentially a much larger total addressable market for Nikola than say Hyzon or Hyliion. But anyways guys, make sure to drop me a thumbs up if you found some value from this video. Let me know down in the comment section below your guys' thoughts on Hyzon, Hyliion, or Nikola, and feel free to let me know which stock you guys are personally buying. As a full disclosure, I am long Nikola shares, and I am neither long or short Hyzon or Hyliion shares. But anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.